Good evening. Welcome to Reading Grounds. Today it is the last Sunday of May 2019. It is the 26th. That means that next week we should have a new song for the stream. Good to see Kimmery. Good to see you here on the stream tonight, so early. If you're going to join us on the stream, anyone else, feel free to pop into the chat and just say hello. Give you a quick shout out. It looks like Tyler, unfortunately, might not be on, at least not quite yet. He might have to get up early tomorrow for work, but either way. Shelby, thank you so much for calling us losers. Nice to have you on the stream, I guess. Now, since we're losers, we're just gonna do the nerdy thing, and we are going to read the front page of Wikipedia. Today's featured article is Arthur Mould, who was an English professional cricketer. He began his cricket career playing for Banbury in Northamptonshire in the mid-1880s, then played first-class cricket in Lancashire as a fast bowler between 1889 and 1901. It says he was one of the most effective bowlers in England during the 1890s, but his career was overshadowed by controversy over his bowling action. Many critics thought he threw rather than bowled the ball. He was penalized in 1900 and 1901 by the umpire Jim Phillips, who had targeted several prominent bowlers with dubious bowling actions. In the news, British Prime Minister Theresa May is under pressure under pressure over her handling of Brexit, announces her intention to resign. A prison riot in Acarigua, Venezuela leaves 29 prisoners dead and 19 guards injured. A fire at a commercial complex in Surat, India kills 22 students in a coaching center. Joko Widodo is re-elected president of Indonesia, and his party wins the largest share of legislative votes. Excuse me. On May 27th, in history, it is May 27th, of course, is Memorial Day in the United States, meaning that a number of places will be closed for the holiday. On May 26th, in 1096, the largest of the Rhineland massacres took place in Mainz, where at least 1,100 Jews were killed by the People's Crusade. The People's Crusade was a popular crusade and prelude to the First Crusade that lasted roughly 6 months from April to October of 1096, also known as the Peasants' Crusade, the Paupers' Crusade, or the Popular Crusade. It was not part of the official Catholic Church organized. In 1644, Manchu regent Dorgan defeated rebel Princess Li Zicheng of the Shun dynasty at the Battle of Shanhai Pass, allowing the Manchus to enter and conquer the capital city of Beijing. In 1923, French drivers André Lagache and René Léonard won the first running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans sports car race. In 1971, the deadliest road accident in England took place when the brakes on a coach failed and it crashed in North Yorkshire, killing 32 people. In 1995, American actor Christopher Reeve was thrown from his horse, leaving him a quadriplegic. He later became an activist on behalf of people with spinal cord injuries. Oh, Tyler's on the stream. Hello, Tyler. Thank you for joining us. Shelby says her mom thinks I have a nice voice, which is good. That's very good. Tell your mother hello for me, if that's not too weird. Looking at the rest of the Wikipedia front page, some of the trivia that's on there. The traditional North German card game of Fipsen is played in the village of, oh boy, Thedinghausen for current buns called Hedewigs. During construction of the tower for Oklahoma City's KLPR TV station, a worker was trapped 200 feet in the air for more than an hour. Nepal's first officially recorded tornado occurred in March of 2019. James William Robertson resigned as the first principal of MacDonald College after spending was restricted to $100. Wow. During the Soviet period of the Fyodorovskaya Church was a factory dormitory. The Gate Church was museum office space, and the Dukhovskaya Church became a boiler room during the Soviet period. Well, hello, Shelby's mother. Uh, Thank you for saying nice things about my voice. So last time we talked about Game of Thrones, of course, and a little bit of the TV show, which had come to its long-awaited end. We also kind of talked a little bit about violence and morality and Machiavellian politics and what have you. Today, I think I might try something a little different. I don't know if I've ever read song lyrics on this show. Um, I think I'm going to give that a little shot tonight. A song that's been kind of on my mind recently has been something called "Once in a Lifetime" by Talking Heads. Um, it's an interesting song. It's got very strange lyrics. It's from the 1980s. I will be sure to put a link to that in the playlist. Not the music used playlist that I have on the channel, but the videos I have talked about playlist. It's a good song, of course. It's kind of a, I don't know if music really has cult hits, but that one you could perhaps consider it to be. I first heard about it from an internet meme, actually. Um, Somebody had posted a picture of a cat, and they had imposed on it the words, "This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife." And the cat had like a ridiculous face, like it had just woken up. I don't know how much good describing a meme does, but the only thing I've been wondering is whether I should actually read the lyrics because they're very strange in their own right. And it might be better to just go straight into the explanation. But for the sake of biding time, I think I'll just read them. So the first verse goes, and you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Now, according to an annotation on genius.com, which is a lyric website that deciphers song lyrics, and we've used it before for this show, it talks about how this style for the first verse, that's the first verse in its entirety. I didn't cut off a part or anything, I just went straight for it. It's sort of fragmentary, like a sermon, a religious sermon. There's a lot of big words in the annotation to describe the song that I don't really understand. Um, But I'll read this particular bit from the annotation that says, "This song is primarily addressed as a warning to everyone going through their early adulthood, meant to embrace them for the quote unquote inevitable midlife crisis, but also to everyone who is the right age to be having a midlife crisis, and it addresses the frequent perversion of the American dreams." Talking about the houses um, mentioned, there's the Shotgun Shack, which is, of course, a dinky little hovel, basically uh, one of an indicator of poverty. But then there's also in the same verse mentioned you may find yourself in a beautiful house instead with a beautiful wife. But the point equates that whether you're rich or poor, you may have the same questions and the same doubts about your own um, status in life. I guess that's the British pronunciation. Status, whatever you want to say. It says here that you may find yourself in an ideal situation or in a bad one. But either way, you may ask yourself whether you worked hard or not. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? And which is to say, do I deserve this? Is this the best I can do? Which is kind of an interesting point. Um, I've talked about this with my brother actually a little bit, and he had mentioned something that um, I found to be kind of profound. He said, no matter how much money you make, it's like you're always going to find a way to spend it. And that had never occurred to me. Like I understood the truth of it, but it never occurred to me that fact. The idea that you'll never quite be rich enough. You'll always find ways to spend your money and to need more. Because I mean, reasonably, you could only have, a couple $1,000 a year and still live off that. And maybe it won't be the most comfortable, but you'll be alive. So there are a lot of people obviously that just want to make more money and more money. Even but the thing is that like, you see the middle class who does that, the poor, the middle class, people who are just struggling. They're like, well, if I had more money, put my kids through a better school or we could, go out to eat more often or something like that. But then you also have the more upper class people, the upper middle class or even the rich who are saying, well, if I had a little more money, I could uh, buy a nicer car or move to a better neighborhood or I could do something with it. And no matter like how rich or poor you are, you'll always find yourself in that position. So it's interesting to kind of take a step back and to really think about that and to say to yourself, because it's really tempting to cut off parts of your life in favor of more money. But when you really get down to it, like you probably don't need, well, I won't say that you won't need the extra money because it still is useful, obviously. You better to put your kids through a better school or, just to be able to live more comfortably, to have a bit of a cushion that if things go awry, you have some money in the account or whatever. But it's always worth considering, rather than I need to make more money, it's, well, what can I do with what I have? Tyler's asking if it would depend on whether you grew up in upper middle class. It might, but I mean, obviously, if you grew up poor and you end up becoming rich as an adult, or for whatever reason, um, you might still not be satisfied. You might get used to whatever your status is, because we do tend to take things for granted and we forget that we have them when we see them every day. You know, you might log onto your computer and not even think about it, but if someday like you get home and your internet's not working, suddenly you're paying attention and you're like, oh, I took it for granted, or you should be reflecting on that anyway. The reality is that we don't actually need that much. but we'll always aspire for more because that's what human beings do. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, obviously. Aspirations are what separate human beings from animals, because you look at a dog. What does a dog need? Dog just needs some food, maybe a bit of shelter, a place to stay, and that's it. Dog doesn't need a better job. Dog doesn't need a big fancy house. Dog doesn't need to move up in the world. Dog just needs to be fed. Same deal with a cat. What does a cat want? Cat wants to eat a little bit and then it wants to take a nap all day. That's it. But human beings, we can get to a point where we've got, a comfortable place to live. It may not be a mansion, but at least comfortable enough that we don't worry about things. And then we might be stable in our lives, but we still want more. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily bad to have ambition, but it's something to consider that, maybe you don't necessarily want to move up. Maybe it's okay to be where you are. Anyways, so moving back to the songs a little bit, that was just the first verse, which kind of repeats itself throughout the song in different variations. But then it goes to the first instance of the chorus, which goes, letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground. Into the blue again, after the money's gone. Once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. Um, the annotation suggests that essentially that life is sort of a one chance thing, which isn't necessarily true, of course, but that's kind of how people see it. But anyway, so there's it goes on to the second verse where it does something similar to the same one, where it starts off sort of that weird fragmentary style that's common with preachers, I suppose, according to this website. It says, and you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. As far as the large automobile thing, it's this idea that kind of that people, when they're going through a midlife crisis, a lot of times, at least for men, what they do is they buy a nice car, you know. um, but then there's this other aspect where the singer has a beautiful house and a beautiful wife, but still they're not satisfied, or maybe they feel like they don't deserve it. um, that there's this sort of injustice in life. Not only that people who deserve good things don't necessarily get them, but the people that don't deserve them are usually the ones that get them. And you may find yourself on either side of that fence. And you may look at everything and be like, well, I don't think I deserve all this. Which, in a sense, it's not quite envy, but it does leave you wanting. It does leave you with sort of a hollow feeling. Like maybe you um, aren't satisfied with your work. Because as frustrating as it is to work really hard and not get anywhere, it's also kind of frustrating in its own way, um, to not work as hard as you could have and to get way more than you have ever bargained for. And certainly that's, well, I suppose I shouldn't judge people, but I know that there are people that perhaps didn't deserve the wealth that they got. I would consider myself to be like that. I'm not the wealthiest person in the world, but when I look at the luxuries that I have, I don't feel like I'm worthy of them. But then there's also the fact that maybe you were, at some point worthy of it in your life. Maybe you did work really hard and you got, what you deserved. But then maybe you got promoted to such a high position that you stopped working, that you just kind of sat there at the top like a fat cat. And you became that sort of corporate executive or whatever that's just sitting over everything and watching it. And you don't deserve any of it. And maybe someday you realize that you stop deserving what you have. Or maybe this is not your beautiful house, this is not your beautiful wife. Maybe you look at these beautiful things, or maybe you look at the things in your life and you feel like they're not good enough for you. That no matter what house you live in, that it's not good enough, that your wife is not beautiful enough. I mean, there are plenty of guys out there that land this woman who's just, gorgeous beyond all reason, and then they cheat on her for some reason. And sometimes they cheat on her with a woman who's like significantly less attractive than their wife. And it kind of goes back to that idea of human ambition, that nothing is ever good enough for us. That we're always like looking for something better instead of enjoying the things that we have. Now, of course, in an instance like that, it's a mistake to jump ahead and um, to take these things for granted, obviously. But it's not necessarily bad to be ambitious and to want more, but at the same time, it's still this thing that can bite you and make your life worse if you let it control you. And so that's something this song does, is it kind of juxtapositions both sides of the argument, that you might be destitute or you might be grandiose, and either way, you're going to have your problems. So it returns to the chorus, letting the days go by, let the water hold me down, letting the days go by, water flowing underground. Into the blue again, after the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. This time the annotation goes into a little more depth. It says that the narrator feels drowned by the demands of adult life, day by day with seemingly no end. But the interesting part of this line is that he doesn't say, I'm being held down. He says, let the water hold me down. He isn't fighting this feeling of drowning. He's sort of giving in. There's also a suggestion that the line, into the blue again after the money's gone, that if you kind of just give up on the importance of money, that you free yourself. Into the blue again can be, it can be a thing of freedom, It could be like flying or even just sailing the ocean. That you don't need to worry about money. You can still live your life and enjoy it. And then there's a bridge that just repeats the line, same as it ever was, over and over again, um, which is about, stagnation, repetition in day-to-day life, um, particularly in regard to a midlife crisis. The third verse ends up being a little bit different. It says, water dissolving and water removing. There's water at the bottom of the ocean. Under the water, carry the water. Remove the water at the bottom of the ocean. Water dissolving and water removing. Emphasizing, of course, the importance of water in the story. It returns to the chorus to repeat the same lines, but then it actually adds a few in the middle. After into the blue again, into the silent water, it goes, under the rocks and stones, there is water underground. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground. into the blue again after the money's gone. Once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. Unlike the earlier choruses, the water in this line is silent and tranquil, not violently holding the narrator down. And underneath all the jagged rocks and stones that represent the sharp reality of everyday life, there is tranquil water underground. And the next verse is a little more harrowing. It goes, "You may ask yourself, what is that beautiful house? You may ask yourself, where does that highway go? You may ask yourself, am I right? Am I wrong? And you may say to yourself, my God, what have I done?" um, as the annotation says, where earlier we were merely being asked, "Where is my beautiful house?" Now we are being asked, "What is this house?" And furthermore, what does it mean? Have I earned it, or was it merely thrust into my hands by luck and circumstance? The highway mentioned here could be seen as the high road or the high life. It's seen as a construct of society and businesses that ends up becoming sort of a prison, because people get stuck in rush hour traffic and whatnot. And to look at everything in your life and feel like maybe you haven't really lived your life as you should, because that's what a midlife crisis is. As you look at everything, you kind of panic, realizing that your life is kind of out of your control. You've got a wife and kids, and you can't do whatever you want. You're just subject to the same day by day repetition, no matter what you do or where you go. So the suggestion for this song, there's more to the song a little bit, basically just repeating lyrics that we've already heard, but um, essentially there's this overarching theme about, it's a midlife crisis is what it is. It's kind of an examination of that. Um, but something that really stuck with me, and I haven't really quite been able to forget it, reading here on the annotations, um, is that the front man for the band, David Byrne, Byrne, I don't know how to pronounce it honestly, Byrne. Um, there's a quote from him about the song. He says, "We're largely unconscious. We operate half awake or on autopilot and end up whatever with a house and family and job and everything else. We haven't really stopped to ask ourselves, how did I get here? Or, is this what I want?" And so this song is kind of about coming to that realization that maybe, you don't necessarily want what you get, but you don't realize that until you get it. And you might hear that and you might think of like a fantasy story, like a wish granter story, that somebody says they want to be wealthy, and instead of it being a monkey's paws situation, they get wealthy, and things are going about as well as they could, and they just realize, well, wait a minute, I'm not happy. How is it that I have all this money and I'm not happy? Or maybe they fall in love with a person, their childhood crush or whatever, and they realize that they're just not happy in that relationship. They spend so many years thinking, oh, I'm going to have a house and a wife and kids, or a husband and kids. And they get there and they're like, well, I'm not happy. I'm not content. And kind of waking up one day and realizing that that wasn't actually what you wanted. So I think about that description of it quite a bit, where he says people live their lives on autopilot. They're not thinking, they're just letting themselves be directed. Um, and by the time they become cognizant of that, it's too late. There's no taking back the time. There's no undoing what's been done. And you can quit your job and you can abandon your family or, you know, drive and run away to a new state if that's what you think is going to make you happy. But at the same time, there was a point when you thought getting married was going to make you happy, and it doesn't. So, at the risk of revealing too much about my personal life, I that is something I wonder about myself. Like, how do I know what I really want? How do I know that I'm going to be happy with this? And for that matter, if I get somewhere and I'm not happy, is that my fault? Or is the situation to blame for it? Was I ever going to be satisfied with what's coming? Or is this my fault for taking things for granted? That's a big question, and there's no universal answer to it. Um, but it's something to think about, especially with like, again, I don't want to reveal too much of my personal life, but well, here I go. When it comes to something like a marriage, a lot of people get into marriage and they think that's what they've always wanted. And then they wake up one day and they're thinking, well, what have I done? I've gotten into this marriage and I'm not happy. Unfortunately, that's happened a lot. And a marriage has dissolved because of that. But again, the real question is it that they don't want that marriage? Is it that they don't want marriage at all? Is it just that they're bored and now they're like trying to prevent themselves from going stir crazy? Because once you get married, life tends to get pretty boring. I think that's a fair statement to say. I've never been married. I don't know for sure. But based on what I understand, that's, people say settling down or whatever, the old chain and ball, that suddenly your life is dictated by this other person. And then you get kids and that increases, not just by a little bit, but by like several fold, however many kids you have and however much attention they end up needing. So, I guess this song, more than anything, um, it sticks out to me because I don't want to be living on autopilot and finding out that I'm off course. But I also don't want to take good things for granted because I look at my own life and I know there's good things going on. Again, I'll get a little personal here. I'm very much single. uh, haven't had much success in that department, and I've for a long while it's really eaten me up. But then I also look at it and I wonder, well, I'm a loner person by my nature. I don't spend a lot of time with people. I don't usually like talking to people. I'm not a Believe it or not, I'm not much of a talker outside of this. Um, I'm not much of a talking head, if you will. I keep to myself. I even people I like after I spend so much time with them, I just want to go home and be alone for like another day. An introvert is what people say. That your personal battery is drained by human interaction rather than other people, extroverts, having theirs being recharged by human interaction. I don't know, like how accurate that is. To me, it's like incomprehensible that somebody could spend so much time with another person and then feel fine. And so I look at all that and I wonder to myself, I'm like, do I really want to get married if I'm the kind of guy that doesn't like spending time with people? Like, is there any person in the world where I'm going to meet him and I'm be like, yeah, I want to spend day in and day out with this person every single day, basically, for the rest of our lives, however long that may be. Like, I mean, obviously there are perks to marriage, notwithstanding, but overall, am I going to be happy married to anybody, or am I going to find a reason to complain? Am I going to find something to be ungrateful for? And that kind of terrifies me because I don't have an answer for that. I don't want to end up, with a broken marriage. I don't think I would, but I don't want to, obviously. I went through my parents' divorce, and that was quite miserable. And I have no intention of repeating that. But, even more than that was that my parents went through a lot of couples therapy. Like some of my earliest memories as a little kid was them having these early morning sessions with a therapist, and I was just, in the other room playing with toys or whatever, not understanding really what was going on. But I remember that therapy. And, my parents tried to make it work, but in the end, they just had to throw up their hands and say, okay, we're done. Goodbye. And, they didn't get married thinking, well, let's get divorced, 29 years later. Nobody does that, I don't think. And for that matter, this is ridiculous. So, my family business, we used to own this senior park, this mobile home park that just had seniors in it, basically. Um, uh, and I found out that this guy that was in the park for a number of years, real obnoxious guy, but I feel kind of bad for him because I guess his wife divorced him. And like, keep in mind, like these people aren't like they're not in their 20s, they're not in their 30s. Um, I don't know how long they'd been married. I think they'd been married a while though, at least 10 plus years. And this guy, he's probably in his 70s, maybe older. And I'm sure his wife's about that same age too. And they got divorced. Like, what? Like how sick of a person do you have to be that you can't just be like, well, we're gonna be dead in like 10 years anyway, so who cares? Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what the drama was, what the straw was that broke the camel's back. Um, but obviously they didn't get married intending to be divorced, I don't think. And you always want to think that you're above it all. You want to think that you're doing better than everyone else. Until you actually get to where everyone else is, and then you're like, man, this is a lot harder than it looks. And that's always fun. But really, I mean, there's no answer to it. You just have to kind of forge your way. But it's a scary prospect. The idea that you can get so far in your life and realize that you've made a mistake, or even just that you're partnered with somebody that doesn't want to work with what's going on and they just give up. It's a scary idea. Because when it comes to midlife crisis, you usually hear about men. The guy starts to get fat and bald, and he looks at his life. He's like, "Dang it! I was supposed to have a sports car by now. I was supposed to have a big mansion, and my wife is supposed to be this trophy wife." And he looks at her, and she's all dowdy and old and ugly. You don't usually hear the opposite side of that, though. You don't hear about the woman who, she's taking care of three kids, and she feels like her husband's ignoring her, and she's old enough that she feels like she can't start dating again, even if she gets a divorce. The world is constantly changing, and neither of them can keep up with it. Um, and it takes two to tango. I mean, even now as I think about it, like I know there's not really a point in worrying about it. Like, because I can sit here and speculate on things that will go wrong in my life, and I'll be here all night because I'm a worrier and I'm an overthinker, and my imagination's uh, overcompensates for all my other faults. But that doesn't really matter because most of the stuff you worry about doesn't happen. I'd like to think that I'll never have a midlife crisis because I don't feel like the kind of guy that would. Um, typically, at least I'd like to think so. Because on the matter, but like I said, nobody expects it. Nobody gets married thinking, well, in 20 years I'm going to hate this marriage. Nobody's thinking like, well, I'll get this job and then hate it in 5 months. Well, okay, some people do, but nobody gets into a career and it's like, oh yeah, I hate this job. I'm going to work it the rest of my life. Or, oh, this is so repetitive. I hate it. And then they keep working it. It's something that they kind of realize after years and years sometimes. And for all my talk about being an introvert and being just exhausted by people and being afraid of them, um, like it really doesn't take much for me to start imagining what the rest of my life would be like with a person. Like if I feel like there's even a chance, like not even before things start going well, but when there's a chance of things will go well, I'll get ahead of myself and start, like carving our names on a tree or whatever. So for all my talk about being, this uh loner and in the shadows and nobody's ever good enough for me, in the end I'm still like so sensitive that I'm like, this girl is making eye contact with me, so we're gonna get married next week. Tyler is saying that buying a midlife crisis car is he's already done that. I'll say this: I don't think Tyler's had a midlife crisis, but one thing I did learn in one of my college classes, not this last semester, but years and years before I dropped out, um, midlife crisis is a misnomer. It's not accurate because, I mean, you don't even know when your middle life is. I mean, theoretically, it could be 30, 40, but you know, it's a lot more than that usually, or maybe less. But the point is that, like, you can be 20 and have a midlife crisis. You could be 70 and have a midlife crisis. But so I'll say this though, I used to believe in the idea of a soulmate as far as marriage and all that stuff goes, and I no longer believe that, and I feel like that's the better way to approach it. That you make things work, or you just don't get involved at all. Because you see both sides of that, where it's just people get into a marriage, but they're not willing to do anything about it. People slack off on their duties, or they get burnt out, or whatever. I forgot what I was going to say. But okay, yeah, I was talking about soulmates. So, oh, what did she say? I met this girl. We never dated or anything, but we kind of talked about marriage because, that's what you do when you meet somebody. You just start talking about marriage. Um, I really liked her little bit of wisdom, her pearl of wisdom, if you will. She said, there's no one right way, you know. She's like, I don't think there's a right way through it. And really, that's the bottom line. You make do with what you got. But it is, I mean, it's daunting. You look at like you look at marriages and you're like, man, this is exhausting just to be around. How do you people like deal with this all the time? One thing that I kind of thought was interesting, um, I no longer work there, thankfully, but at my previous place of employment, um, I noticed that my bosses, maybe, they would sometimes like he would take a vacation without his family, and then his wife would sometimes take a vacation without the family, just on their own, some me time. And I that thought had never occurred to me. And at first I was like, that's kind of weird. But as I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's actually probably a really good idea. It's probably a good idea to do that every so often. Just give some people some me time. Because otherwise you'll just burn yourselves out. And as the saying goes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Tyler says me time is the best time. I agree. I agree. That's kind of like what I was kind of fidgeting about. Still am really, but like I enjoy me time so much. I'm like, do I really want to get married or do I just want to get laid? I don't really know. Maybe both. But the book that I'm reading, um, Beyond the Cabin by uh, Jared Garrett. It's a pretty good book, by the way. He mentions in the dedication, he dedicated it, I guess, to his wife. I hope it's his wife. Um, Hi, dying over here. I'm Kimmery. He mentions he's like, you justify my being a hopeless romantic, which is really sweet. And then I followed him on Twitter and I found out he has 6 kids, and I'm like, holy moly. I grew up the youngest of 4. That was more than enough, for the record. That was a lot. But he's paid off he posted on Twitter that he had paid off his student loans recently. He's only like, 35, I think. He's kind of a cool dude. I think I've mentioned him on the stream before, but definitely check him out, especially his podcast. It's what is it called? Hold on a sec. Okay, it's Tales from a Cult Insider, because he grew up in a cult, and that's what the book's about that I'm reading. It's kind of a fictionalized events of him growing up in a cult. Uh, but he's a cool dude, very down to earth. I'm gonna take my break. Um, be sure to think about your midlife crisis. Think about that song Bohemian Rhapsody, which is basically a midlife crisis, except also about mama killing a man. That's a good song. Maybe I'll do more song lyrics in the future if I find another song. Um, although probably not a whole lot, just because this song Once in a Lifetime, that's really like it's a pretty rare song for how much it like kind of gets stuck in my head, and not necessarily in a oh that's catchy kind of way, but in like man that really affects me. That kind of messes me up. But anyways, I'm gonna take my break. I'll be back. Please don't go anywhere. Excuse me. Okay, I think I'm back. But yeah, as I mentioned, quit my other job, my kitchen job that I hated so very much. Um, I'm gone. I'm no longer there. My I had turned in my notice like a week ago, and I was like, so I got another job lined up. I've I was like, I'll give you guys until the beginning of June, which would be the pay period. So I was like, all right, I'll get one more full check out of these guys. But then Tuesday, I think, my boss, the one I didn't really like, was like, "Are you gonna be upset if I leave you off the schedule next week?" So I was like, "No, not really." So yesterday was my last day, and it was a short day, thankfully, because they closed earlier for the holiday. But um, so hopefully, I do have my class starting June 10th, I think it is, just the one summer class, and I've got my other job. Um, Hopefully, I'll be able to do more writing. I've got kind of an idea for a series that I kind of want to mess with. I had this idea to just like write a series and just write it as quick as possible and just see if I could do like good short stories. Not necessarily like super short stories, but like novellas maybe. And to just get them out real fast and get them on Amazon and Kindle and really put my name out there and um, just charge like make them like dime novels, like $1 or $2 each. And then hopefully, if not make some money off of it, then at least put my name out there. Because I do have my other book, which I've been working on for a while. That's still a ways off. The thing about that is that, like, with that book, um, it's a heavy hitter. Not necessarily in the sense that it will be successful, but just in the sense that it's so like it's weighty. Like there's a lot to it. It's not just like, oh, I decided to write a story about something. Like well, I don't want to brag either, but point is that it's like there's a lot of thought that's gone into it, and I'm very careful about how I present it, really thinking over it, which has been fun, but it's also been taking me years to write, especially with everything else that's been going on. Um, because I haven't been able to do any real writing this past week between uh, my old job and the new one. But the thing about that is that like I don't like I hate the idea of starting a series or something else before finishing the other thing because I'm like, because like that happens a lot, especially with aspiring writers. My buddy Jason, whom is basically dead to me, not because he's done anything wrong, but just because he hasn't responded to anything I text him. I don't even think he's been on. Let me check, see if he's on Steam. But he's been like that. Yeah, yeah. Last online 3 months ago. Come on, Jason. What are you doing? Living your life, hopefully. But anyways, press F to pay Jason respects. But like he's an aspiring fantasy author, and I talked to him a lot about not super in depth about whatever his ideas was, but I was like, you should really get into it. But he's like, yeah, but every time I like start something, I like get caught up in something else, and I don't want to do that, you know. I don't want to, because that's what I've been doing so far. Is I had one book, like the first book that I ever seriously tried to write, and I gave up on that to start a different one, and then I gave up on that to start the one I'm on currently. I mean, it was a little more complicated than that, but the only thing is that like with the first two books, I kind of gave up on them because I didn't really believe in them after a while. And with this current dark fantasy book, um, I feel like I'm really confident in it. I know it's good, and I know that I want to finish it, which is saying a lot for me because most of the time I want to give up. And this one, I don't want to do that. I want to keep pushing forward. And I find myself thinking about it even now. Like, I'm always like, oh, you know, what if I did this or that? I was thinking that would be my first book originally, but as I started thinking about it, you know, I'm like, it's a really weighty book. Like, it's, if it is as good as I think it is, it would be really well received, at least critically. I don't know if it's that good. I hope it is. I don't know. But the point is that, like, you know, I'm a nobody. I've never had anything published. I have a Twitter account now, um, but I don't tweet that often, and it's under my real name instead of my pseudonym, which I need to change if I'm gonna be a writer. I haven't, you know, none of my short stories have been accepted on the few occasions that I've submitted them. And you know, some authors, like, I don't know if you can really make a living off of short stories, but some authors, they do a lot of them, and that's how they build their careers, with short stories. And you know, I don't know if I could quite do that, but I had this idea where I'm like, well, I have this idea for a character that I think is kind of cool. Maybe I could just write a bunch of like short stories that get him involved, and like what I'll just do is I'll just bang him out. I'll just, you know, throw him out there. I won't even think about it. Just, you know, go crazy and throw out all these weird ideas, even if they don't make sense. And then, if nothing else, people will find it entertaining. Like, kind of in my mind, sort of like a James Bond figure, where like it doesn't necessarily connect, but it's entertaining enough that you don't care, and it's competent. You know, it's not like it's not terrible. It's just it's good enough, basically. And that's what some authors do, at least on Amazon's. When I went to the League of Utah Writers, their spring conference, I attended a lesson on um, this by this woman who basically, I don't remember what she called it. It was like binge reading, but it was like for writers. She's like, it's sort of like, you know, binge watching on Netflix, but for books. And what you do is you have a set schedule where you release your first book at this date, the second book 3 months later, the third book 3 months later, and then the fourth book, you know, 4 months later or whatever it is. And like her writing pace is insane. Like, because you know, for me at the most, I write like 1,000 words a day, maybe. And for her, she's like, when I sit down to write, like, I don't stop until I've got like, I don't even remember what it was. It was like 10,000 words or something, which is insane. For comparison, Stephen King says that he writes 2,000 words a day. That's Stephen King. Neil Gaiman said he writes 10,000 a day, for whatever that's worth. Um, we don't talk about Neil Gaiman though, not since American Gods. That book was boring. Anyways, so the idea is to try and do these small stories, to just bang them out. And I'm taking an imaginative writing course this summer. That's my only course. So if all goes well, I might even just be able to use those stories for that course, or to use that course as like a propeller. And for me, I'm like, um, Tyler's asking if any of those 10,000 words are good. Uh, yeah, that's kind of my point. It's like, it's an impressive output, but I'm not the biggest fan of Neil Gaiman, to be honest, which is kind of ironic given that the dark fantasy book I'm writing on was heavily inspired by one of his stories. Um, that was The Sandman, though, and like that was a comic book and not an actual book, which I think has something to do with it. Shelby's asking if I read any Stephen King. I have. I've read The Shining. Maybe The Shining's the only one I've read all the way through. No, I lied. I read The Stand, which is his longest book. That one was okay. Yeah. Stephen King is all right, and he'll admit that. Like he's gone on record saying that he is the book equivalent of McDonald's. He's not embarrassed about it at all. I did read a good chunk of it actually, but I was kind of getting burnt out of it. No pun intended. I have a lot of respect for Stephen King just because he seems like a cool dude, even though he is the literary equivalent of McDonald's or whatever. But anyways, so like it takes me a while to do good writing, like especially with this dark fantasy book where I'm like really careful and I'm like really thinking ahead and trying to decide, how all the pieces fit and making sure that it's really cohesive and careful. Um, but aside from that one lady who does binge writing, whatever you want to call it, there's also a different book that I read called Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I've ranted about it, I think, to Tyler on Steam. One of these days, I really just want to type up a review and probably just read it on stream because that book drives me a little nuts thinking about it. But essentially, like, it's not that well written without getting into too much detail. Like, it kind of drives me nuts. And one day I'll talk about it more. But basically, the idea is that like a book can be successful even if it's kind of clumsy. Because that book, Name of the Wind, it is seriously like some people have said that it's on par with Game of Thrones. And that alone makes me want to swear because that like I love A Song of Ice and Fire and it is not A Song of Ice and Fire for the record. Um, it kind of makes me mad to hear people say that in retrospect. It is not nearly that good. But that having been said, it's something to consider. I don't know why people find it as good as they do. I can only guess, and that's just speculation. But anyways, maybe what I'll even do is write a review, and then I'll go to the reviews on Goodreads and talk about how they're wrong, and tell people via the stream that their opinion is wrong. That sounds like fun. But anyways, point is that for as careful as my current book is, I'm also thinking, I'm like, well, if I'm going to start my career, maybe I should just do something clumsy, get my name out there. Because the thing is, like, even if something kind of sucks, there are going to be people that like it. Because there are people that like the stream. I hope you heard that, because that's how I feel about the stream. It's, like, you see it on the internet. Like, there's bad fan art or something. People be like, oh, this is great. There's fan fiction out there that's just, like, basically word vomit. People are like, oh, this is great. I love reading about Kirby and King Dedede making out with each other. King Dedede drooling while eating. Don't Google that, by the way. Just do yourself a favor and don't. Don't say I didn't warn you either. I'm dead serious about that. Point is that, like, you'd like to think that if you're careful and you write a good book, you're going to be successful. It's not necessarily true, as Name of the Wind has shown us. And also that George R.R. Martin, his first book, was well received. Like, critics loved it, but it didn't sell very well. And it sold so poorly, he almost gave up on writing. He almost went into real estate. Shelby, do not Google it. Do not do it. Just forget it, okay? Stay temple worthy. You will never look me in the eyes again. So the point is, like, that's kind of a relief in some ways. Like, it's frustrating because you're like, well, shoot, I've been spending years writing this book and you're telling me that it might suck. But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe I can just make something that sucks and then get my name out there and be like, oh, by the way, my new book is so much better. And then people realize, oh, it actually is. How about that? So I had this idea for a character, and I'm like, I can write stories about this guy and have him go on his wacky adventures with his, stupid little sidekick, and I'll sell t-shirts that say team, whatever, and people will pay me money and eat, like, especially if it's just a small short story and it's like $1 or $2, but just like, hey, buy this story. And they're like, ah, well, it's only $1, might as well. Um, so I would like to be able to do that and get my name out there. Hopefully with the summer I'll be able to do it. The only problem is every time I think I'm going to write something simple, it ends up becoming complicated, which is kind of cool. That I'm like, dang, I'm so deep and intricate, and I can make all these words happen. Because I want to start a blog as well. I'll talk about that more. But I started to write an entry this morning, or today rather, and I was like, I don't have a lot of ideas for this one. This one's going to be short. It ended up being the longest one I've written to date. So, you know, it never works out. Um, but that kind of happened with this story. I was like, okay, how am I going to start this? I was like, well, I'll just have a story where he goes and meets this guy and kind of introduce some of the powers and the magic and all this stuff. And then I kept going, and I was like, well, I need to explain this and I need to explain that. And if I want to do this, it's got to be this. And by the end of it, I had this big tangle mess. I'm like, oh, come on. This is not a short story. This is going to take me another 3 years to write, which is kind of cool that I'm capable of that. But at the same time, like, that's kind of the opposite of what I meant to do. But anyways, hopefully I can do that. I would love to be able to even just read those stories on stream or do kind of what I was originally thinking and just doing my own audiobook. Because with the dark fantasy story that I'm writing, I don't want to do the audiobook for it because it's a lady story. Most of the main characters are women. So I'm like, okay, I need a woman to read this. I need to find some like old European lady, like the lady from Dark Souls, who's like, yes, indeed, the Dark Soul or whatever she says. I don't know, but I need somebody like that who can read that story, and I can't do it. But with this one, I can do it myself, and I don't have to pay anyone else. And it can just be crappy. Just be like, hey, here's another dollar, or, give me another dollar and read this book. And even if people like it, they're just like, well, um, okay, it's only $1. Kimmery's saying don't explain it, keep some mystery and explain it over the series. Yeah, I'd kind of had that idea actually. Because the thing was that like I was intending small stories, like I said, like novellas at the most, probably maybe even just short stories. And then the like one idea that I had, I was like, okay, this is a lot more intricate than I thought it was. Basically, like what it's not the plot itself, it's the characters, which is where my writing tends to shine for itself. If I don't have good characters, then there's not really much to say. But basically, like this kid rather, like his brother's girlfriend gets him into crime because his brother's a ne'er do well, I guess. Uh, and so because he's in jail, she needs someone to help her. So she kind of leads him on because he's a dumb teenager and doesn't know what he's doing. And as the story goes on, he kind of pieces together that she's just messing with him, that she's just um, leading him on, so to speak, or manipulating him in a PG-13 way. I didn't intend for this to be Game of Thrones. I wanted it to be PG-13, but the point is that like eventually he kind of realizes that, and then, well, I won't get into detail, but like that idea of having a character do that to me, I was like, okay, that's like an extra 100 pages to explain all that and get it to work and set it up and all this stuff. So this is not going to be a short story. But it's like, okay, so I can't do this first, even though this is the origin story of this character. So it's like, okay, I need to move on, move forward, and go back and do this and all this other jazz. But I would absolutely love to do that. Hopefully, I can. Because, like I said, I'm not trying to think about it. I'm just trying to write and just like really stream of consciousness. I don't care if I contradict myself, as long as it's comprehensible and it's fun to read. That's it. That's all I need, and that's all people will care about. But Kimry has the right idea because I was like, okay, maybe I could have the origin story be later. Because if I do short stories, then I can have those be there and be like, oh, this and that, and then later on be like, okay, here's the intro, here's the first story, here's where this character comes from and how he gets his powers. Here's the story behind all that, and it's got a really cool name. I was gonna call it a Thief in the House of Greed. Maybe I shouldn't say that on stream because I'm paranoid about people stealing things. But basically, it's a series about a thief who steals stuff. But he's a noble thief, of course, because you can't have some douchebag thief without him having some serious character arc. But so, anyways, that's the idea behind it. Hopefully, I someday get around to that. I'm hoping with my new work schedule, I'll be able to. I'm not working tomorrow, but I've got stuff going on. I'll be working Monday through Friday normally. And then my class is like Monday, Wednesday. My class is in the morning. It's like 10 a.m. So I'll do that, get done, go do whatever, and then eventually go to work, at night. Which is definitely nice. But I should have a lot more downtime now. And hopefully because of that, I'll be able to do some more writing and really get involved. Oh, excuse me. I'm gassy. Hopefully it'll all work out. I am worried though that I'm gonna get started on this, and every like short story I'm gonna be like, okay, this is not actually a short story. I'm way deep over here because I want to get the dark fantasy story done. I really want to get that out there and put it out there and be like, hey, this is my magnum opus. Because I'm not convinced I'm ever gonna write a story better than that. It's probably not as good as I think it is, but right now, from where I stand, that's how I see it. And like, even though I would love to write a sequel and I'm thinking about it and like trying to decide how that would work, like I don't know how a sequel would work to this book. So I don't know if there's going to be a series or if this is going to be a one-off. I don't know. But anyways, this is a lot of hypotheticals. And I honestly feel kind of stupid. Well, maybe not stupid. I feel a little silly talking about hypotheticals because these are just ideas, like no one cares about that. But because talk is cheap, and you've got people like Jason who have great potential, but then they don't get around to it, and it really hurts my heart. It really does. So I don't think he's writing. I think he just I don't know what he does, but I don't think he writes as much as he should. And like my big regret with writing is not starting earlier because I love it. I was writing that blog post today. I was like, man, this is kind of meditative. Like this is like Zen stuff. It's nice. It's to the point where like that dark fantasy story, I feel almost addicted to it. Where like, cause I'll be like, whatever, and then like I'll just start thinking about it, and I like fall down this kind of rabbit hole where I'm just coming up with all these ideas and trying to think things through, and which is great, but it's all just ideas. But anyways, so one thing that YouTube has, they have this button called Create Highlight, um, and I'll probably like if I do ever get around to writing those and doing the audiobooks for them, I'll probably just do those audiobooks here and probably just only do those on here. I don't know if like you three people or four or whomever is on here, I don't know if any of you actually care to listen to that, But like whenever it happens, however long that's going to take, that's going to be the plan ideally. I probably shouldn't even talk about it till I'm closer to doing it because, like I said, this is all just conjecture. But for the record, that's the plan. Anyways, um, I'm gonna get something real quick. I'll be back in 2 seconds. I'm not even gonna play the music because I know you guys love it so much. I'm gonna find something to read, and I will be right back in like 2 seconds. So hold on a sec, just like two. Okay, I'm back, PewDiePie. So back in 2012, when I was going through college for the first time, I wrote a little paper for my English 1010 class. We were talking about rhetoric. Uh, and rhetoric as an idea, like rhetoric is the art of convincing someone or of proclaiming your opinions or whatever. And so, what this class was about was like learning how to detect rhetoric and analyze it and look it over. So we were given a choice of like short stories to look over and to not short stories, but like articles to look over and to decipher them and make sense of them and then do a paper on it. So when I was writing, or when I was reading, I should say, I was going through it and I found the first one that I picked, I was having a real hard time with. I couldn't make sense of it. There's all these charts and I didn't really understand what was going on. So I gave up on it. And I was kind of like I was in a rush because the paper was due. And then I ended up switching to this other article, like kind of last minute. And I was really panicked and stressed out. And then I read this article, and it made me mad because A, I was already in a bad mood, and B, because the guy writing it was a complete idiot. And so I wrote a paper analyzing it and just spent the whole time bashing him. So I thought I would read it here on the stream because I still have that paper. And I've got it right here in front of me. It's 3 pages, double spaced. The original article was something called Animal, Vegetable, Miserable. Not mineral, miserable. And the subheadline to my paper was attempting to understand the undisputed genius that is ethical veganism. So we're gonna make fun of some vegans tonight, which I know you all love. Trigger warning, vegan bashing or whatever. So here we go. This is one of the first college papers I ever wrote. When he's not ignoring the human suffering which plagues the earth, Gary Steiner, philosopher professor at Bucknell University, enjoys the act of protesting the thought of killing any animal at any given time. A self-proclaimed quote-unquote strict ethical vegan, Steiner declared in the year 2009 with a New York Times article titled Animal, Vegetable, Miserable that any and all products which at any given time demanded the use of animals as a resource to be unethical. Such a decision would be difficult for a layman to understand, but the great professor manages to back up his claim with a single piece of evidence, namely the quoting of a single author's work. The logical conclusion to this fact is that this proof will undoubtedly shake the foundations of the earth and cause all who gaze upon it to forever surrender meat, leather, silk, wool, cosmetics, medications, refined sugar, and band-aids. After all, if someone wrote something, then it must automatically be true. Steiner begins with a setup of common standards regarding meat, more specifically whether or not livestock is used for food or treated humanely. The author questions if killing animals for any purpose, even food, could ever be ethical, and insists that animals dying in the name of human consumption is equivalent to the mass murder of human beings. The exact reasoning for such a bold claim is not examined until paragraph 6, but leaving his opinions of the murder of animals is intended to help the reader understand the author's value of the Animalia kingdom. Using the term mass murder to describe the deaths of chickens and cows allows the reader to compare the necessary sacrifice of survival to that of bestial tragedies such as the Holocaust. Contrary to popular belief, such a comparison is completely justifiable and sensitive to the very real victims of Nazi Germany, and only an educated person could understand that human suffering in the name of prejudice is exactly like eating. To justify his astounding evaluation of animals, Steiner cites Isaac Bashevis Singer's The Letter Writer in the 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs. Quoting select excerpts from the protagonist's philosophies on animal life brings forth Steiner's main claim. The practice of delivering animals to the table in the form of food is abhorrent and inexcusable. Naturally, when the morals of a random protagonist written by a random author coincide with your ideas, you must naturally be correct in your assumptions. Therefore, no more evidence shall ever be needed to prove your holy cause. It would be redundant to detail exactly why meat as food is an unforgivable transgression. Professor Steiner was even smart enough not to use examples of philosophers and their reasons why meat is unethical, because, after all, critical thinking has nothing to do with vegetarianism. Any and all radical agendas could be justified by following the author's methods and citing exactly one person that wrote a book at some point and just so happens to agree. In the 16th paragraph, Steiner insists that it is acceptable to ignore the very real murder and sufferings of human beings all across the globe, so long as one is dedicated to animals not dying. After all, what is human suffering in the context of cattle that die a painless death? Absolutely nothing, that's what. Forget the human race. The lives of animals are literally the only things that matter in this world. Yet again, Professor Garrett unleashes his unstoppable and amazing logic to the world so that the innocent animals might be saved. Moving on from what was undoubtedly a life-changing experience, the reader may be seeking an alternative lifestyle so as to prevent animal suffering indefinitely. Searching and searching and searching the brilliant logic of the essay will leave one exhilarated, but the exact lifestyle choices and alternative used by strict ethical vegans is never thoroughly touched upon. Instead, Steiner the Amazing insists on talking about the adversity he faces as a self-righteous man. His own words, talking about losing friends because they enjoy the taste of meat. Of course, one would never lose a friend over starting arguments due to self-righteousness, and thus it must be assumed that they are the ones who are wrong, and not yourself. Yet even more impeccable logic presented to the common masses from Gary Steiner the Glorious, praise be unto him. Philistines might argue that animal, vegetable, miserable accomplishes nothing and argues little, but any learned person will see the infallible and astounding gospel of Steiner. The only logical action now is to destroy the human race with nuclear armaments, so that the poor innocent chickens of the world may never have to be dinner again. The next time a malicious dictator slaughters innocent people by the millions, Gary Steiner will rise in the east in his glory to declare to the world his infinite wisdom. At least he isn't killing animals. How very true, Professor. How very true. We should all learn from the Professor's social sensitivity and wisdom, so that the world may be a better place for animals. For animals, after all, that is all that matters. So that was that paper. It was kind of fun writing that, just because, well, I got to be angry, and I was in like it was very cathartic. I got a 91 out of 100 on that one. Um, so yeah, like I said, I got a 91, which is like an A. The only thing was that the teacher says in her notes on it says just needs more specs, SPECS, specifics, I guess. I don't know, regarding supporting evidence, even if about the lack of it. I still don't really understand that criticism. I don't know how this could be better. I mean, this paper is perfect except for a few uh, grammatical errors. That's all I had. I'm proud of that paper, even after all these years, just because, mostly because it was fun to write. But philosophers, what are you going to do with them? I guess I could take this time to talk a little bit about Beyond the Cabin, which I had mentioned earlier on the stream, because I don't have anything else to talk about. I don't know if you noticed. Um, I think I might have mentioned him before, but I'm going to mention him again because I like the guy. You meet a lot of people selling their books at Comic Con, and they'll sell you their pitches, and it's really rehearsed and all this. And you look at the book, and it kind of seems like the cover is a little generic, and the pitch isn't really selling you. So whatever. This one, I'll admit that like the cover kind of looks like a placeholder texture in a video game, where like they're like, oh, we need this book. What's it gonna be? Just put some trees on it, some mountains. Um, I haven't finished it, unfortunately. I'm not even like halfway through it, but I want to talk a little bit about it. Not because it's groundbreaking, but just because I enjoy the subject material. So the guy, like I said, grew up in a cult. I'm not sure what kind of cult it was. I think it was some weird Christian cult. And I don't know how much of this is true, unfortunately. But basically, the story is that being in this cult, isolated from the world and all this, his older brother leaves. And it's not even like entirely clear if he actually is his older brother, because it seems like they're all like considered brothers and sisters, and there might be like some weird um, open marriage stuff going on where like everybody share like a lot of kids share a mother or a father, but not necessarily both. And they're all cult members, obviously, at least as far as I can tell. The parents, that is. Um, but the thing is that like so he and his brother, like the name of the book comes from the fact that they're building this cabin in the middle of the woods, which becomes their kind of retreat. It's not finished. There's like no roof on it or something. But his oldest brother essentially leaves the cult and gets a job as a drug dealer, and then uh, he ends up before too long he ends up getting killed. And so the book, like again, this is supposedly based on the author's story, life. I don't know how much of that is true, um, but it seems very personal and like it doesn't have like it's I think it's the guy's first novel, and I don't. That's kind of an it's kind of a nice way of saying it's not as well written as it could be. Um, I don't think it's poorly written though. It's clumsy, but like it feels sort of real in a sense because the main character is like this kid, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And so in a way, like the weird clumsiness kind of feels genuine, especially if this main character is actually the author, like as he was as a kid. But it is pretty good. Um, and this guy, like I guess eventually he's spoiler alert, he's supposed to escape. Um, Shelby says the two people she knows used to be in a cult. Just interesting. Are they like related? Was it the same cult? Please tell me, Shelby. I'm curious to know. But anyway, so I met the guy at Comic Con, and a lot of people like they kind of seem the same, but this guy stood out because I think I've told the story. I'm gonna say it again because I'm running out of things to talk about. Um, I was wearing a shirt, had some Japanese characters on it, and he points out, he's like, "Oh, and he starts translating. I'm like, "Oh, you speak Japanese? Yeah, yeah." I asked him, I was like, "Oh, did you serve a mission in Japan? It's Utah." He's like, "No, I served mine in Brazil, I think he said, or the Philippines." He says, "But I taught Japanese or I taught English in Japan for a while." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So he's kind of talking, and he sold me on his book, and he just seemed like a real genuine guy. Like instead of just trying to sell a book, and not even like genuine in like the way a salesman kind of comes across. I was like, "Yeah, you don't have to buy my book," but just like I don't know, like it's hard to explain, but like he was different. And I'm really curious about his podcast. But it is a testament to the content of this book that it is as clumsily written as it is, and it's still engrossing. Like it's not hard to read. I can't say the same for the best New York Times bestseller, Name of the Wind. Shelby says that they were part of a cult but didn't realize it at first. This seems to happen quite a bit with cultists. Like the kids growing up don't realize like that that's different. But that's just what I've heard. You kind of grow up and you don't realize that things are different than what they are supposed to be. And it kind of throws you for a loop. Again, not to get too personal, but like with my family growing up, like my parents were arguing all the time. I thought that was normal. I thought that was what families did. And I was a grown man when I realized that wasn't the case. Um, but hopefully, I'll be able to finish this Beyond the Cabin and talk about it some more. So far, though, I would recommend it. A, because this guy's like got 6 kids and he's real cool and he's genuine. He's not some arrogant douche who's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be the greatest thing." He's just like, "Yeah, aspiring author, doing his best to make his way in the world." Um, yeah, so the dedication in the beginning, it says, "This book is dedicated to Anna Marie. You justify my being a hopeful romantic." Oh, not hopeless romantic, hopeful romantic. That's that's much different than what I assumed. Oh, I guess while I'm here, Shelby, uh did you finish any of those books that you got from Comic Con? Tyler's also mentioning Last Podcast on the Left. I did like their L. Ron Hubbard stuff. They had like 3 or 4 videos on or episodes on the guy. It was interesting stuff, although I don't want to get too political on here, but basically like I was listening, I think it was to like the Charles Manson episode because I was kind of curious about him and his cult. And some of the stuff that they talked about, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Um, they had talked and they had claimed that like maybe it wasn't that one, maybe it's the Children of God cult. Uh, what was the name of the book, Shelby, and the author? If you want to type that up on stream. But anyways, maybe it was the Children of God cult episode. They kind of talked about it, and they're like, "Well, cult leaders, especially like with the Mormons, Joseph Smith started it, to justify his polygamy." And that was like I'm I'm okay with people criticizing, with questioning things, even like a little bit of misinformation. Like inevitably, if you're not a member, or even if you are, there's going to be stuff you don't know. That one, however, was a big indicator to me that what they said just wasn't true, or that it wasn't as well researched as they'd like people to believe. because the thing is that like the idea is that they're like, oh, um, Joseph Smith started his cult in order to practice polygamy. It's like, okay, so he wrote the Book of Mormon to practice polygamy. The only mention of plural marriage in the Book of Mormon is condemnation. Like that, it is only mentioned once, it kind of in passing, and it is mentioned in condemnation. So it's like, okay, well, if he wrote the book to justify his polygamy, he didn't do a very good job because there's like no mention of it. So it's like they didn't like they base that assertion on an assumption. And again, like I'm not I'm not expecting them to necessarily even be tolerant, but for them to have like such a lack in that basic, most cursory research, it's like, I can't trust anything else you're going to say. Not even just about the church, but about anything else you're going to talk about. So they're kind of entertaining, I give them that. But at the same time, like I don't know how much of it is actually true and how much of it is just conjecture. So I can't endorse them. Not simply because they're obviously opposed to my religious beliefs, but because they're wrong about why they're opposed to it, or they're proclaiming things which are like obviously not true, like to such an extent where like if you did any research at all without even having to consult a biased opinion, you would know that it's not true. And I like even talking about that, like it kind of makes me feel like a religious nut, which is probably me being self-conscious, but yeah, the only instance of polygamy in the Book of Mormon is in Jacob, I think it is. And Jacob is talking about the saints and he's condemning them for practicing plural marriage because they're trying to justify it. And he's like, you're not justified in this. You're doing the wrong thing. So for them to just say that the book was written for that sake, it's like, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. And it's not even like, oh, like there's this thing in the Book of Mormon which is kind of crazy. It's like, okay, yeah, it kind of is weird. It's not even that. It's just, I don't know. It kind of short circuits me a little bit. But anyways, I would say that their L. Ron Hubbard episode, I don't know how well informed it is because again, now I'm doubting everything they talk about. It is entertaining though. But anyways, Shelby's mentioning "Good Girls Stay Quiet" by Joe Cassidy. Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's got averages a full 5 stars out of 24 customer reviews. Um, $4 for the Kindle version, $18 for hardcover, 14 for paperback by Joe Cassidy. Shelby, did you started the another book that you had bought at Comic Con? Is that right? Shelby's saying she can't decide which one to start. Definitely start with that one that was the supernatural one because you're gonna love that one. In fact, uh, if you have it, oh, I guess you probably don't have it on hand because it sounds like you're not home. But basically, we both kind of met this author at Comic Con, but he convinced Shelby to buy his book. Um, he is selling this book, and we kind of talked to him, and like he said that apparently he had started off by doing just short stories, and they were so well received. People were like, "You got to write a book." He's like, "Well, all right, if you insist." I think he won some kind of like contest or something, or at least did well in them. I don't remember what happened, but definitely read those, Shelby. Um, write reviews on Amazon, for both of them. Even if it's just, oh, I love it, it's so great, well written, because that stuff it helps little authors out. And I'm not an author, but I'm very small. Anyways, I'm so bad about reading. I need to read more. Even like books I like, I have a hard time reading. Just I don't know what that says about me, but anyways, Tyler, actually, let's call on you since you're responding to messages a little bit. I know you listen to a lot of audiobooks. Any good ones lately, aside from last podcast on the left and all that? I mean, you don't have to tell us, but we're all family here. Fear to Tread. Is that a Warhammer book? Oh no, maybe Black Library. That okay? I'm gonna post that album cover because that is baller. Hold on, answering a text. Sorry, but yeah, that is a freaking cool. Okay, so according to the blacklibrary.com, or sorry, just blacklibrary.com, it says sent on a fool's errand by his trusted brother Horace, the Primarch Sanguinius, excuse me, and his blood angels must face all the warp-spawned armies of chaos upon the plains of Cygnus Prime. Oh, so it's a Christian read. It's got angels. Uh, drugs, 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 which are good, which are bad. Drugs, drugs, drugs. Ask your mom or ask your dad. Drugs, drugs, drugs. Okay, that is a freaking cool album cover. Anyways, read it because the Blood Angels make their Horus Heresy debut, a deep insight into the motives of their angelic Primarch Sanguinius reveals the underlying contamination of the Legion that affects them to this very day. An explosive read featuring armies of daemons and the horrors of chaos. Book 21 in the Horsey Heresy series. Holy moly. It is a $40 MP3 to buy that book. $12 for the ebook version. How many words, brother? How many words? Shelby's asking me if I can sing that again. The Drug song from Drugs. It's like some kind of drugs I was going to say YSA. That's not the word I'm looking for. PSA. It's like a it goes just like out of the blue. It doesn't even have an intro. I don't think it just goes drugs, drugs, drugs. Which are good, which are bad? Drugs, drugs, drugs. Ask your mama, ask your dad. I gotta sing quietly because otherwise people will wake up. But Jontron did his funny little video about it, and it was funny, you know? Because Jontron is a funny guy, even if he is kind of anti-immigration. I did sing it. That was my singing voice. Okay. Okay, so apparently that's 500 words, Fear to Tread. A little bit about the author. I've never heard of him, but he's a New York Times, Sunday Times, and Amazon best-selling author and scriptwriter, a BAFTA nominee, a former journalist, and the award-winning writer of over 50 books, along with scripts for video games, radio, and television. Dang, that's a pedigree. I, Tyler says he did buy Dune. He hasn't gotten around to it. Um, Definitely. I mean, like I couldn't finish it. I gave up on. I mean, I could have, but I gave up on it. Maybe you'll get more out of it than I could. If you do, let me know what you think, Tyler, because you seem to be more science fiction than I am. Um, so I'm kind of curious about your thing. James Swallow. I'm kind of curious because it says he's written like video games. Are these just game books or like actual scripts? Okay, it looks like he wrote like the actual scripts for Deus Ex, Human Revolution, Mankind Divided. Looks like the books as well, it seems. Um, oh, apparently he's done writing for No Man's Sky. That's interesting. I didn't even know that game had writing. James Swallow. Let's see what else he's written for. He's written Tom Clancy. He wrote the script for Division 2 and Ghost Recon Wildlands Fallen Ghosts. Dude writes a lot. Dang. Tyler says listen to the first three. I wonder if I could get hired on as a reader for those because I can do my Space Marine voice. That's what I'm doing right now. Apparently, he also wrote the script for Space Hulk Tactics. Um, he has his own original fiction, uh, thrillers, Sundowners. Um, oh, like Western novels? Huh. All right. Apparently, he's done Doctor Who, 24, Judge Dredd. Um, Kind of curious about his other tie-in fiction: No Man's Sky, Butterfly Effect, Ghost in the Shell. Oh, he wrote the movie novel for Ghost in the Shell. That's kind of interesting. Tyler says he can gift me with the first one on Audible. I do appreciate that. I don't know if I'm trying to decide if I want to make this joke or not. I just got a text from my sister, and anyways, I'm not going to make that joke. That's beneath me. That's how crass it is. Um, Tyler, you're very generous to offer. I think it might decline though. I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks. Um, I don't know. At least not for right now. My job, I might be able to start listening to audiobooks because it's a custodial job. I'm able to. They say you can wear headphone. It's kind of weird because my Google Pixel, which I love, by the way, I love my Pixel XL2. It's amazing. It doesn't have a phone jack, unfortunately, an earphone jack, which is kind of obnoxious. That's like one of the few things I don't like about it. Um, it however, thing about it is that like at my job, they're saying you can have headphones in, but you can only have one in, which is fine. I don't have headphones. I have this wireless thing, and I got specifically these outside the ear things. Trex Titanium, it's called. It doesn't actually go in your ear. The idea is that you can listen to music, and it technically doesn't block up your ear canals, so you can hear things going on outside of you. It's kind of a trip because it doesn't go in your ears. It just rests on like your cheekbones. Um, anyways, but the thing is, it's kind of hard to wear it only just one ear. So I'm wondering, I'm like, well, is it okay to wear both ears? Because it is outside the ears. Tyler says he hopes I go Goodwill hunting, write my book out on random chalkboards. I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna go to like some science lab in like Cambridge, and I'm gonna like when they've got like this unsolved theorem, like, oh, this is the this is Einstein's second theory on quantum physics, and but we can't solve this one equation. And then I'm gonna get in there and I'm just gonna start writing about like a little boy that gets killed by his uncle. And I'm gonna, who wrote this? And then I'll get fired. Fun times. Um, but I'm trying to decide if it would be anathema for me to wear those out of the ear headphones. I don't think it'd be a problem theoretically, but even if it isn't, I don't want to wear them quite yet because I'm still new. So I want to at least be comfortable with the job before I even bring it up. But until then, I'm not like in an audiobook position. So we'll see how that goes. That's a lot of words to basically say nothing at all. But I do appreciate the author. The offer. I haven't actually seen Goodwill Hunting. I kind of do want to see it because I've heard it's good, but I also know it's kind of a tearjerker, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. Worst Robin Williams movie now is World's Greatest Dad. It's a movie about him. It's a comedy drama movie about him and his son kills himself on accident, but then he covers it up and makes it seem like it was um, done out of depression or despair rather than because his son was uh, strangling himself while beating his meat. It's not exactly a family movie, but so the whole like Robin Williams is the kid's dad, and so he's trying to cover it up, but he's also an author, so he's like capitalizing on his son's death by writing a book about it, a memoir, publishing his son's suicide notes, which are really just him coming up with stuff. Um, Great movie, but horribly depressing, especially in retrospect. Now that um, Robin Williams is gone. I almost called him Tim Allen. That's not quite right, but R.I.P. And I'm so sorry that they had Will Smith play you in the movie. I heard the Aladdin movie's okay. I don't really have any interest in it. Um, whatever. But anyways, about time to give up for the night. So this should be the new format. This is the first night we had an hour earlier. Uh, it seems to work pretty well, so we'll probably just keep on that. Shelby saw Aladdin. She liked it. Yeah, apparently people really like it. It's been getting pretty good reviews. But again, I don't care. I don't need another Aladdin movie. Anyways, so thank you all for joining us tonight. Next month we should have another song. Hopefully things will go well, and if not, just they won't go well. But we should be used to that by now. Anyways, thank you all for coming. Have a good night. Have a good week. I'll see you next time. Good luck.